Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the Lotus Mandala crochet tutorial. This part covers rounds 9 through 16 of the Lotus Mandala, which does appear in the Lotus Mandala Duster pattern and the Lotus Vest pattern. Those are two free patterns found on my blog. I will link them in the description below, along with a couple other helpful links. The mandala on screen right now ends at round 16, which is what this video goes up to. And if you like the video, please hit like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me. So we're starting from where we left off in part 1, which is at the end of round 8, and we're going to start round 9 by chaining 3. This round is probably the #1 round that I get questions on, so I'm going to try and make it as clear as possible. To start by chaining 3, you're going to work a treble with the last loop on a hook, and you do that by yarning over twice, inserting your hook into the next single crochet, drawing up a loop, and then drawing through 2 loops twice. That's going to leave you with almost a full treble on with the last loop on the hook. You're going to repeat one more time in the next stitch, which is that double crochet. We're skipping all the chain spaces. Again, we're going to work that treble, leaving the last loop on the hook. And once we have those on the hook, we're going to draw through all loops on the hook. And that gives us this little pyramid shape. Next, we're going to chain 7. And we're going to start this process all over again. This round makes those triangles out of the treble 3 togethers. So we're working a treble with the last loop 3 times. It goes double, single, double, and then crocheting them all together. And then the next place we're going to start is actually the last double crochet that you worked. It's in the same stitch. That one throws people a lot. But what you're really doing is creating this triangle shape that's balanced on either end on a double crochet, and those double crochets share the same space. So each double crochet is going to have 2 treble 3 togethers worked into it. And you're just going to chain 7 in between each one. It's kind of a difficult written pattern, but once you see it worked, it makes much more sense, I think. And on the last repeat of round 9, you're going to place your 3rd treble with the last loop on the hook before you make the yarn over and draw through all loops. It's going to go in the first double crochet of the round, so it's going to go in the same stitch as your first stitch. And then you'll chain 7, and then you'll join the round in the top of the first treble 3 together. Make a slip stitch. And I'm going to spread out my design here so you can kind of see better how those trebles are in separate stitches, but they're joined together at the top with chain spaces in between. Just giving you a good look. So hopefully that round makes more sense now that I've got it on video. And in the beginning of round 10, I'm going to go ahead and change yarns. Again, as I mentioned in the last video, whenever you're changing colors, You can cut and tie off anywhere, but just make sure that you begin in the last place that your hook occupied. So you'll want to start the rounds in the same place as the pattern indicates. So to begin round 10, you'll chain 4. That does count as the first double crochet and the first chain 1. In the chain 7 spaces from the last round, we're going to work 3 clusters composed of 4 double crochets each. So that's 1 cluster I just made on screen. And I'm looking at the computer right now to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. I didn't have the subtitles when I shot this. So in between each of the 3 clusters that go in that chain 7 space, there's going to be 2 chains, and then cluster again, chain 2, and then in the same space work that 3rd cluster. And after the 3rd cluster, one more, chain 1, then double crochet in the top of the treble 3 together. And you'll repeat the instructions inside the parentheses 15 times around. So each chain 7 space will get these 3 clusters, and on each side there will be a double crochet. You have to kind of wrestle them into place. Here we go again with the next space is 1 4 double crochet cluster, chain 2, another cluster in the same space, chain 2, another cluster, then chain 1 and double crochet in the next treble 3 together. We're going to speed this video up. This round takes a really long time. And skipping forward. This is 8 times faster than the actual video. I sped it up times 8. And it's still taking forever. So when someone asks you why something you are making is so expensive, you can show them this video so they can get an idea of how long it actually takes to make something by hand. Okay, after all those clusters, we're getting ready to finish up round 10. Here we go. We're working into the last space. Work those same clusters. Chain. And then we've already got that beginning double crochet, so we're going to join with a slip stitch into the 3rd chain. That would be the top of the chains that count as the first double crochet. Whoops, wrong one. 3rd chain, slip it in, make a slip stitch. Pretty, right? I really like rounds 10, 11, and 12. So to begin round 11, get situated here. I've got all these little clusters. There's going to be 1 cluster in between each cluster of the previous round. So these two chain 2 spaces will each get a cluster in them. To start that, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. In the next chain 2 space, work that 4 double crochet cluster. And then chain 2. Oops, I gotta check my pattern real quick. Making sure that I'm chaining the right amount of stitches. Okay, yes, chain 2. And in the next chain 2 space, in between the previous rounds clusters, you work another cluster. And then chain 3. You're going to skip the next cluster and the next chain space, and you're going to anchor that chain 3 into the double crochet that's right there, just with a slip stitch. And so you have those 2 clusters kind of stacked with chain 3s on either side, slanting upward toward your clusters. It makes a really pretty kind of petal-like motif or design, I think, especially when you add the next round. 1, 2, 3. Anchor with a slip stitch, excuse me. Chain 3 again to get up to the right height. More clusters. And we're gonna speed up the video. Speed. Again, this is 8 times faster than I normally crochet. Kind of stopped for a minute so you can see what I got going on before speeding back up. Okay, and finally, ending round 11, we're going to go through that last repeat process. So I chained 3 at the end of the repeat, and normally that would go in the next double crochet. But to finish the round, we want our hook placed at the top of this last cluster. So we're going to use a chain and stitch join. So we're going to use a stitch, the double crochet, to replace the 3 chains that would normally go there at the end of that repeat. So yarn over and just work a double crochet, and that double crochet stands in for your final chain stitch while leaving your hook positioned in the right place to begin the next round. Next, we're having round 12, another round that I get a lot of questions on. Again, like round 9, I think it's a bit simpler when you really just see it. So we start by chaining 3. This counts as the first treble with the last loop on the hook. A treble is 4 chain stitches equivalent normally. Since we have 3, it's a shortened treble. We're going to work another treble with the last loop on the hook in the top of the next cluster. So yarn over twice, draw up a loop, draw through 2 loops twice, and then draw through all loops on the hook and chain 4. We're going to work 1 4 double crochet cluster in between the 2 clusters of the previous round. So we have this kind of cluster pyramid thing going on. We have 3 and then 2 and then 1. So we chain 4 again. We're going to work a treble with the last loop on the hook in the next cluster. So yarn over twice, pull up a loop, draw through 2 loops twice, And we're going to leave that last loop on the hook and do the same thing again in the next cluster all the way over here in the next pyramid. So we end up with these two trebles on the hook, and we draw through both of those and chain 4 again. Then cluster, chain 4, treble with the last loop on the hook in the next cluster, treble with the last loop on the hook in the next cluster. I think this confuses people because the trebles span this length of the lace, and people are used to stitches being right next to each other when they're hooked together like that. Or I don't know, any number of reasons it could be confusing. Written patterns can be very confusing, which is why I'm expanding into videos. I think it is going to help a lot of people understand this pattern, and I'm excited about the reach it's going to have. I hope you like it. Again, please do like and subscribe to my channel if this video is helping you, because I would love feedback for making more videos. And as you can see, we've speeded it up again. Fortunately, the end of round 12 is pretty easy. We just have this chain on the hook and join with a slip stitch in the top of the first treble 2 together of the round. In round 13, we're going to start off in the space that's next. So we'll insert our hook just under the space is fine and make a slip stitch before chaining 3 to count as the first double crochet, and in that same space we're going to work 4 more double crochets. Round 13 is blessedly easy after all of that clustering and monkeying with stitches that are drawn together and skipping large amounts of spaces. It's really straightforward. You just 5 double crochet in each chain space, and then work a double crochet on top of the cluster, another 5 double crochet in the chain space, and then another double crochet in the top of the next stitch, which is a treble 2 together. It's just 1 double crochet on top of that. Sometimes I work it in the actual top, which is kind of more toward the right. Sometimes I'll work it in the center, which is kind of inserting the hook through the middle of the top of the stitch. Today I'm just going to do it in the actual top. As long as you do it consistently the same way every time, it'll look fine either way. So we're just doing a round of double crochets, really simple, straightforward. Really helps even out the previous rounds, and the tension just looks more balanced and gives us a good start for the rest of the pattern. And to end the round, we're just going to place our final double crochet in the top of the last treble 2 together, and then join with a slip stitch in the 3rd chain of the beginning chain 3, which did count as our first double crochet. So here I am making that final double and then slip stitching, and that's round 13. And the next round that we're going to do is actually one of the extra rounds. These don't exist in the small size pattern, but they are available for sizing up the pattern, like making larges, and you can even do extra larges depending on how many extra rounds you do. The large has 2 extra rounds after round 13, but we're only going to do the first one in this video. And that really consists of, we're going to do double crochet around again, but we're just going to increase at a ratio that keeps the circle flat. And for this pattern, that means we're going to double crochet, we're going to chain 3 to start, and then double crochet in each of the next 22 stitches. So that's making 23 stitches to start total. That's 1 double crochet per double crochet of the previous round. And this allows you to expand the circle while also keeping it flat. The expansion of this circle will help increase the size of the garment, which is why you can repeat round 13.1 pretty much as many times as you want, as long as you keep the increase ratio the same. So since we're making 23 double crochet stitches and then placing an increase, the next round we'll make 24 double crochet stitches before placing an increase. And then the next round after that, if you chose to do a third round, you would make 25 double crochet stitches before placing the increase. So it just goes 1 up each time, and that keeps the ratio so that the circle will lie flat. It will change your stitch counts from the written stitch counts in the pattern. I've told a lot of people, like, it's not a big deal as long as you just repeat the parenthetical repeats around as many times as possible. You can fudge it a little bit if the numbers don't quite add up. So I placed my 2 double crochet increase, so I'm just going to repeat that process around by double crocheting in 23 stitches and then placing an increase by working 2 double crochet in the next stitch. As I said, you can do the extra rounds usually a couple times at least. This one, since there is an increase ratio involved, you can do it pretty much as many times as you want, but if you're making a really large one, keep in mind that this is increasing downward as well. So if you're short, you might end up with a piece dragging the ground if you're not careful. And I do have a FAQ, frequently asked questions, for this design that goes over some of the ways to increase this pattern if you're interested in making larger sizes than the large. I'm just going to finish up round 13.1. And we're going to do that by slip stitching in the 3rd chain of the beginning chain 3, and that's our join for the round. So now we can move on to round 14. So chain 4, that counts as our first double crochet plus chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the next stitch and chain 1. Or just repeat around. So it's just double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, all the way around. This is another easy round. No clusters, no trebling together, just pretty straightforward. So we're going to skip it and go ahead and finish it up with this last tiny little piece of t-shirt or sweater yarn that I've got. Just enough to finish the round and start the next one. As I said in the last video, all the yarns that I'm using in this particular project are upcycled. They're recycled from old sweaters. So we're going to make that join here in the third chain. It is a recycled sweater yarn, so I get sweaters sometimes from Goodwill, sometimes from friends donate, and I take them apart. I rip out all the seams and undo all the cast off and bind offs from the machine knitting, and then I rip out all the yarn and wind it up and reuse it in different projects. So start round 15, we're going to skip the first space, and in the next double crochet we're going to half double, and then we're going to work several more stitches into that same stitch. First a double, then a treble, another double, half double, and then we're going to skip the next space, and in that next double crochet we're going to work one slip stitch to anchor that pretty little scallop. Then we're going to skip another space and make another scallop in the next double crochet. But first I'm going to change yarns because this tiny little ball has had it. And we're just repeating the instructions in the parentheses all the way around. Ending the round on a slip stitch in the very first stitch of the round. So you can see round 15's over here. We've ended at the same place that we started, and I always change colors at round 16 because otherwise the scallops get worked into, and if they're the same color then it's hard to kind of make out their shape, so there's no reason to do all that for nothing. So we're going to change colors so that you can see the scallops still after round 16. And just chain 3 to count as the first double crochet. We're going to skip the first stitch. It's right there, that half double. Do not work that one. We're going to work into the next stitch, which is the double crochet, and we're going to work a half double into that stitch. So skip, work a half double in the next stitch. We're going to work a single crochet in the top of the scallop, which is the treble. So single crochet. In the next stitch we're going to work another half double, and then we're going to skip another stitch. Skip that stitch and work a double into the slip stitch between scallops. So double, going to skip a stitch, work half double into the next stitch, a single crochet into the top of the scallop, a half double into the next stitch, skip the next stitch, and then double crochet into the next stitch, which is the slip stitch between scallops. We're just going to repeat those instructions within the parentheses all the way around. And here we are blowing through round 16, give you a little idea of what that's going to look like. You can probably see why I changed colors. And to end round 16, we're going to work through that final repeat on that last scallop. So same thing we've been doing, skip that first stitch of the scallop, half double crochet, single in the top, half double in the next stitch, and then we're going to go ahead and slip stitch into the third chain of the beginning chain 3. And make slip. Ta-da! So that's the first 16 rounds of this mandala. I do intend to make a full video for the Lotus Mandala duster pattern. I only had the first 16 rounds in mind for now though, so I'm not sure when I'll be completing the tutorial, but I'm pretty excited about this version that I'm making now, so might not be too long. Again, thanks for joining me. You can find the full written patterns that this mandala appears in the links below my video in the description. And do like and subscribe. Please do visit my blog. I have a ton of free stuff available on my blog. Crochet patterns, tutorials, tips and tricks, weird projects. It's all there. So I'm Morale Fiber, aka Regina Weiss, and thanks for joining me.